I'm Debbie Davis, and I'm an alcoholic. And my home group is the Castle Hayne group in Castle Hayne, North Carolina, about 3 miles outside of Wilmington. My sobriety date is February 5th, 1992. And I'll read something just to get centered. Make sure I'm not spouting off things that I shouldn't be. But it says, in spite of the great increase in the size and the span of this fellowship, at its core it remains simple and personal. Each day somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. And so sometimes I forget that it just takes two people to have that chat. And many times in my kitchen, at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning with somebody who couldn't stay sober, I got the pleasure and the joy of seeing something happen in their eyes. And it might have been just for that day, and it might have been for a week, but something fed my spirit to continue on doing what I've done for 27 years now. So, so I'm going to go from the beginning and then skip a few thousand drunks and go to the end. Okay, so get on the train here. My first drunk. Yeah, I don't know what this is all going to come out. I don't write notes, and it just comes out, and hopefully I'm not in the way. So I remember moving to the States and growing up here. I'm from Canada. My mother's from, went to Canada with my dad, and she's from Kentucky. Well, he's an alcoholic. We had to move to Kentucky and get settled. So, up there when you drink, everybody drinks. I've had 4 uncles who died as a result of alcoholism. There were 5 boys in the family. So there's one still living. He's the youngest. And he too has a problem with alcohol. So all 5 boys in my dad's family suffered greatly. Some died early, some died car accidents, some died cirrhosis, some actually died of loneliness. Mom left all that, brought us to Kentucky, and so from there, at the age of 15, I'd taste alcohol and sipped on my dad's glass or whatever, but I got invited to go on this ride to go look at a car with a couple of fellas, neighbor fellas, and I get in, and we're leaving in their muscle car. It was an old Mustang at that time. Of course, there was a Chevelle involved somewhere, and there was a Camaro involved, so I liked those kind of cars. And usually there was good-looking guys driving them too, to be honest. I know, I got to let the truth come out, Steve said. So when they offered me a beer, and I remember going, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what nobody wants me to know about. I'm going to get an opportunity to drink a beer like I should be doing. And I drank it, chugged it down, and I could feel it. Could feel that euphoric feeling. Now, that was the first time I actually felt the euphoric feeling. I had other drinks before, but that was the one. And then I'd had a few more. 6 months later, I dropped out of school because I dropped out as soon as I turned 16. And I was off and running for that same euphoric feeling up until I was 28. So that was the first time. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of times between because it never changed, it never stopped. For 2 weeks it stopped. But I'd planned my next drink because I thought I needed to get healthy or something and maybe just not drink for 2 weeks. But that was probably the most miserable of all. So when it came to that last drunk, I will have to say a little bit of in between there because I was one of these people that always thought taking my life would end all the pain that I would experience having if I didn't have alcohol in my body. There was a lot of pain. And at that time, I was married and to a wonderful man. We had everything we could want. He liked to drink a lot too. And I remember thinking that I was on the edge of probably losing him because he really didn't need a drunk wife. And he was able to manage working. I was not so able to manage that, although I did hang on to jobs. So I remember the last time I tried to take my own life. Every time usually I tried to take my own life, I had no alcohol in my system. It might have been 24 hours or it might have been overnight, but the detoxing and trying to, I wasn't in euphoric blackout, put it that way. It was like dead, fall down, pain kind of stuff. And he had walked in on me with one of his last guns. I mean, we're probably skipping over about 50 guns because he sold them all. He had a huge gun collection. This was the last one, and I found it. And it had a hair trigger, and it was the most important gun of all of his collection, but I once again found it. And that makes me think sometimes when I first got sober of all the promises that Bill had made Lois, and he had written them down. And I mean, it very well could have been me, over and over and over and over, except I just didn't write them down. I was making phone calls going, I'll be home after happy hour. Now, we didn't have a cell phone, so you had to call from the bar. And a lot of things were different then than they are now. So sometimes I forget how it's easy that you have communication devices that we carry with us all the time. But at that time, you had to seek that out. And so, and I would try to let them know I'd be home or I'd be safe. And once again, I'd wake up in a strange place. But this last time I woke up in a strange place, it was in the middle. I had been drinking probably for about 12 hours. And I say that because I had experienced daily drinking, which was really, really hard on me psychologically. And when I went on a bender, because I had that experience, bender was hard on me physically. And that's when I would probably have seizures or go into some kind of withdrawals. Well, at this particular point, I was in about a 12-hour drunk, and I'd passed out, woke up, and I knew something wasn't right. I went home, got home, found my truck. Once again, it was lost. And I got to my home. I know, it's lost so many times. I always had people help me looking for that vehicle. One of them. So when I'm getting home, and something inside of me was telling me I'm not going to live. Something inside of me was, once again, I knew I was going to have to detox. I also thought I was pregnant at this time. So that was really important in all of this. So I get in there and I'm trying to detox. Now, detoxing for me was drawing all the drapes, making sure nobody's in the house. You sit down for 5 minutes, you stand up for 5 minutes. You'll lay down for 5 minutes, you get up for 5 minutes. I mean, it's just this in-between world. You don't want to talk to anybody because you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, and so you make up all these excuses or you just don't answer the phone. It was a place that I'd reached many, many times, and sometimes there were other substances to help me through that. But this particular time, it was really no fun, and the pain was all coming back. And so when I had probably been going through that for 24 hours, I noticed my husband never came home. And wasn't that it was that odd, it was just I felt like something else was getting ready to blow, like, okay, we're getting divorced. But I ended up the second morning calling, and my insurance company, I had insurance, I worked in the lumber company, and they provided insurance for everybody. And I called them and I said, I've got a friend, and she has a drinking problem, possibly. What could she do to come and get some help? And they were like, well, hold on a second, and, talk to me, very kind. And I remember this date. I couldn't remember anything else, but I remember the shock of the date, because that was like February 7th or 8th. They gave me February 21st. We'll be glad to make her an appointment. And I'm thinking, February 21st, I'll never live. And I said, well, no thank you, and I hung up the phone. And I stood there staring at the phone, and with everything behind me, all those thousands of drunks and years and everything that had gone on, and all of the losses and all of the jobs, and, telling it in 10 minutes doesn't feel like that there's enough to tell you, but if you all lived that, then you already know what I'm talking about. Something told me to pick up the telephone. Something. I had a sponsor who says, yeah, that's usually how we get that message. And I picked it up and I called back the lady and I said, so what do you do in an emergency? And she said, ma'am, if you can be here within the 30 minutes, we're going to talk to you right now. And so she already caught on to what was going on. And I got there, got into treatment. And my experience with AA was my dad repeatedly tried to get sober. He had taken the only book in Canada at an AA meeting in Smith Falls, Canada. I mean, it's a long way out in the boondocks for that place. And when you go to a meeting, they had one big book, and they loaned it to him. He never went back with it. I mean, I've heard all these stories. But he tried getting sober before I was even born. So he probably had a tormented life. You know, there's one place that I remember at the page of 25, because it really hit home, is like you can choose to live a spiritual life, or you can try and gamble with it and see how it goes for you and go back, you know. And that's what he did. He gambled with his life. And he was miserable for all those years. But the most he ever got was 5 years. But he would show up and he would play. And I'm telling a little bit of his story because I got to pick and choose what I didn't want to do. And he would go play poker with the people outside of the Alano Club. And I remember going, this doesn't seem like he's very happy. Anyhow, so I went into treatment and I did all of the wonderful things they had me do. And then they said, well, I played drums and I had a drum teacher that I noticed that he didn't drink anymore. I mean, I didn't ask. He didn't tell me. I just knew he didn't drink anymore. And I hadn't gone to him for any drum lessons in a long time. And Marty, the counselor, because Marty was a drummer, and so we put 2 and 2 together and we knew some of the same people. And we said, you know, I said, well, Marty, he's asking all these questions. And I said, well, what do you drink? Because he's asking me, what do you drink? How much do you drink? When do you drink? Did it cost you a job? You know, all the typical 20 questions. But the real thing was, where do you wake up in the morning time? You know, that would have been a clue right away. Or, you know, do you lose your truck every day? Or, you know, those kind of things. And do you lose your dog on the beach when you go out on the river and things like that? That was always the thing. And I would turn the question around and ask him. So at my sickest, I even got sicker and totally untrusting. And I would ask him, you know, what do you drink? How do you drink? And he was very kind. He goes, I do drink, and sometimes I might have a beer or 2. And I'm like, aha, you know, that's bull. So he talked me into staying, and he said I probably had an alcohol problem, that I should really, really consider checking in and staying for 28 days. And I said, but I'll lose my job. And we all, you know, think of something other than our lives, because my life was at stake. And so when I said, well, let me try it like this. Let me do your outpatient program. And we did. Every single night after work, I had to go straight there. And we had group. And it was wonderful. And it was the first time I'd ever gotten with people because I was always with people. I loved people. I guess at that time I thought I was an extrovert, because I fueled from people. But those were the parties and the drinking that went along with it, and the dancing and all the crazy stuff that went along with it. But I remember these are the people I'd been around, and they weren't drinking. And I was hearing these stories that were very similar to mine, whether one was a Dilaudid addict, one was a Robitussin addict, there was all kinds of addicts in there. And a few of us were even alcoholic. So I liked the Dilaudid addict, though, a lot, because he and I had some things in common, but he ended up having to go to prison while we were all in there. But he was so cool. He was Mr. Super Cool. He got caught on an airplane. And then there was the Robitussin addict. He came in and started smelling like cough syrup, so we had to ask him not to come back. He didn't say he was an alcoholic, though. He was a cough syrup addict. And then, which I found out is a thing. It's a thing. I found out recently, actually, in the last few years. That's a thing. It's a big thing. So as I made my way through this, I ended up, he said, you're going to have to go to an AA meeting. And I'm like, oh, no. I know, it's corny. It's a cult. They get these stupid little chips. I've seen it over and over and over. My dad would come home and say, hey, I got a 90-day chip today. Or, hey, we're going to an AA Halloween party. Want to go with us? And I'm like, are you crazy? And he'd have a big hat on. I'm like, what? You go to a party and there's no drinking and you wear stuff like that? I can't even imagine. I mean, really, that's reality. Why would you go like that? And so I'm like going, yeah, well, I don't think I'll be going to any of your parties anytime soon. Well, so started my journey. And in my journey, I went to my first AA meeting. As a matter of fact, my drum teacher conned me into going. because Marty, my counselor, made me call Dwight, my drum teacher, and said, tell him you want to go to a meeting. And I did. So I called, I said, Dwight, I said, I hear that you go to these meetings. And he immediately said, Debbie, what's your drug of choice? I wanted to say something that was like really fulfilling, like I have a bad coke, I'm a cokehead. Because that makes sound rich, like you own yachts, like you're famous, there's a lot of money involved. But who wants to be an alcoholic? Because it's pathetic. You lose your children, you lose your cars, and you smell really bad. So I thought, I didn't know I had a choice, but that's what I wanted to say, but it was not true. I was not a cokehead. Well, I think one time I got down on the carpet 1 or 2 times, but that but alcohol though, alcohol was my master. And so when I said, well, I may have a drinking problem, he goes, either you do or you don't. I mean, he didn't mess around. He goes, well, I tell you what, he goes, tomorrow night we're going to go to one of them AA meetings. And I said, well, tomorrow night, I said, I think this was a Wednesday, I recall. I said, could we just do it Saturday? And he said, well, we need to get started. We need to do it now, right away. And so apparently him and Marty were like talking, because Marty said I couldn't come back to those meetings at the treatment center if I didn't go to an AA meeting. And I thought, well, that's because I loved those little group meetings, loved them. Crazy, they're so crazy. And when he said that, I'm like, well, that's kind of like blackmail. Because I really thoroughly loved those people. But now he's saying, was there something wrong with that? I'm doing just fine right here with this group. Why would I want to go to an AA meeting where they have the parties with no alcohol? I mean, that's the way I saw it. So Dwight made a deal with me. He said, Michelle, which was his wife, who was one of the funniest women I knew, she was hilarious. I loved being around her. He goes, tell you what, Michelle will go with us. So I said, all right, let's get Michelle on board. I'll go. Get there at his house. He said, go get in the truck. We're loading up and leaving right now. And I jump in, ready to go. You know, Michelle's coming. This is going to be fun. He gets on the other side and he gets ready to take off. I said, hold on a second. Michelle's on here. He goes, don't worry. She ain't one of us. She's standing at the door just waiting. So he got me to the meeting. I mean, almost had to tie me up and take me, but I got there, and it was terrifying. It was this little redhead. She was about this tall. She was a Pentecostal preacher. Now, in Kentucky, a Pentecostal preacher usually handles things that you don't want to handle. And she looked at me, and she said, God's got something in store for you. And she looks at you right in the eye, and I'm like, oh my God, I knew it was a cult, and this is it's not going to work out for me. I stayed. It was a Thursday night original group is what it was called. I'll never forget it. I do remember 2 things that they said, and that was one of them. The other was, this program isn't for wimps. And I thought, if I don't go to the next meeting, they're going to really think I'm a wimp. I mean, this was all about me. I had no idea that they were, I'm thinking I better get there. So the next meeting, I went on a Saturday morning and got there, and I noticed that it was a full room like this. And I noticed there were people falling asleep. I'm like, well, if it's that important, they wouldn't be going to sleep. And then I remember listening, and I don't really remember anything out of that meeting except, well, I'd like to come and get you, and we'll go to another meeting. And so it began there, and I'd go, and I would never speak. I was terrified to say a thing. I didn't admit to anything. And God forbid if somebody said, I tried to commit suicide. I would get up and walk out the door because I could not bear that kind of discussion. That took me a long time to face that I actually was one of these people that wanted to do myself in. The queen of suicide's what I called it now. But so after I hung out with the sickest of the sickest in AA, they were really sick, but they had some parents that were pretty sober. And I would run around, and we would do things like in a snowstorm, we would go shopping to get a fix. We would, and I was married at the time, still married. He ended up not wanting to participate in any of this at all. Not for him, but you go have at it. And in order not for people to know about it, I started going to meetings in the next town, 30 miles away. I didn't want anybody to know I was an alcoholic, although I drank with all of them. They all should have known. So when I moved to town, I had a little apartment, and I said, I'll try it like that. I'll live in the little town. He can have the house. We'll try it. We're not separated. We're just going to do it so I can get sober. Because it was tough being on the river and trying to stay sober with all your friends running around on their boats going, Debbie, come on down. Debbie, show your, And I mean, party was on when all that stuff started. So I did the right thing by staying in Lexington at that time. When we had that little apartment, I ran around with a lot of new people, and I learned a lot. And we would sit around and stay up all night long listening to tapes. Don P., Gary B., Joe, I forgot Joe's last letter, Mark. There was all these different tapes I would listen to, and they started speaking this lingo that I wasn't quite, I'm like going, well, I've never heard. And they talk about carrying their big book, and that the big book was a text. And I said, well, maybe I'll start looking at this. And I found a sponsor, because it took me a while. There were 5 candidates for my sponsor. And I picked the one that had everything I wanted, right? Tanning bed and a Cadillac and a big house. I mean, they say you get what you want. And so she sponsored me up to the 7th step. We met every week. And as we were going through this, something started hitting right here with this big book. But she had to admit that she'd never gone any further. Never made amends, never did any of that. And I'm like, what? And here I'm hitting on about 6 or 7 months at that time, I believe. So I also knew this other fellow. He would be we both had the same home group. I joined that Saturday morning group. And he always carried his big book around. He'd carry that book around. He's a big, tall guy. I loved him to death. He ended up being one of my best friends. But that first year, though, I couldn't stand him because he'd open up that big book and he'd read out of it. And I'm like, God, get a life, you know? Why do you have to really? I mean, we've all read it. Why would you just constantly, he said, and he'd meditate. He'd open it and he'd be meditating. I'm like, okay, so let's move on. When things were hitting the fan, there was a time where I felt like that I was going to probably drink again a few times. Well, okay, maybe 7 or 8 times. But one of them was about this time when I realized that I needed to find somebody who's going to finish these steps with me. And I knew there was some urgency to this, but I don't know where I was getting that from, but there was some urgency. And when I found it, I said, you know what, George, walking around, not to be a sponsor. I didn't want him for a sponsor, but he had a wife he talked about. I'm like, I've heard his story, and if she stepped over his passed out body every time she walked in, because she was sober longer than he was, and she'd talk about just stepping over the body. I'm like, I want her as a sponsor. And I tracked her down, and I found her, and I called her up, and I said, I need a sponsor, and I'm in the 8th step, and I'm trying to make these amends. And she said, well, I'm a little busy right now, but I'll be glad to talk to you anytime. She goes, or I can help you find a sponsor. She goes, but you can call me anytime you want. And I said, well, okay. So I called her every single night. Every time I was going to make an amends, I just called her. I didn't care whether she was going to be my sponsor or not. Does that really matter? She said I could call. And I called. And about the 20th day, I called her every day. And she didn't say anything different. I got a hold of her. She'd answer. We didn't have these things. You couldn't text. Had to pick up the phone. And I called her and I said, well, I got this one amends to this old boyfriend I need to make. And I said, I need to thank him for getting me the dog that I always lost as I got drunk. I loved that dog more than anything. She ended up passing when I first got sober. I need to return some things that belonged to his best friend who got electrocuted, that he would truly want these things back. And I need to apologize to him to how I hit him, and I've left marks all over him with the rings that I used to have. And I mean, because I used to do that kind of stuff. And she didn't say it. I said, well, what do you think? She wouldn't say anything. I said, what's going on? She goes, you've brought me to tears that you really want to do this, and about the dog. She's one of them animal people. Those animal people. God. I can't go there too much because I'm one of those animal people too. So she said, finally, she said, all right, I'll sponsor you. And she sponsored the hell out of me. I mean, that was some good stuff that happened in my life through that period. Now, she was willing to take out the safety net and let me fall on my rear end every chance she could let me fall, because it was important that I did that, because I really needed to know what worked and what didn't work. One of the things that we knew that worked is writing, she would say, okay, you've done your 5th step, you've done inventory, I want you to write a sex idea. I said, a sex idea? He's tall, handsome, and dark, and he's about 2 years older than me, and he has a great job. She goes, no. We're going to write a sex idea, and we're going to take your inventory, and we're going to read the questions in the big book, and this is what we're going to do, and you're going to live by this. And I still didn't get it. We started writing down, well, how do you want to be? How do you want to be? And I said, what do you mean? I said, it's sex. She goes, no, it's not sex. It's a sex idea. In other words, you're going to learn how you want to be in any kind of relationship, whether it be a spouse or a sister or anything like that. I'm like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. She goes, well, that's what it's all there. So we started making this almost like a roadmap out of my inventory, according to those instructions in the big book. And it's like, oh, I want to be honest, because I was dishonest through everything. Oh, I don't want to abandon people before I get to know them, because I would run from you in a heartbeat. If I thought you were going to get one over on me, boom, I'm gone. Yeah, 3-day retreats and having a party, and I'm gone, and I never see you again. That was so common throughout my whole life. And so simple little things we would write. And every time I had a problem, she goes, get your list out. How do you want to be with this human being? You're learning how to have a human relationship. And it was one of the most important things between making amends and writing this little idea of how I wanted to be with other humans. And it was amazing. So, with that being said, because somewhere in there I got divorced, and it was the right thing to do, because that man I had left, and probably a total of 20 times over 10 years. I'd move out and take all the furniture, or I'd come back, buy new furniture, or I'd move out and just take the microwave, or I'd come back. I mean, it was a every other weekend thing, just take and just completely be the tornado in this man's life. He needed me out of his life so he could go on and do what he needed to do. Now, there's a further story that goes on, but that was after with some sobriety. So when I'm doing good, I was accountable to some people more than just a sponsor. I believe in nuts and bolts. The more people that know you and that you can allow them in, the more peaceful and freedom you're going to have. And I got that. I had several old timers helping me with that. There was a Camille F. in Louisville, Kentucky, who was really big with that. The whole thing of me being sober, and the whole theme was like, what's your inventory telling you? You know, I'm like, and now today it's like, if we don't have if you're not writing inventory, you're missing about half of the freedom and peace that you could have, or the amends that come from it. So, having I'm not making a step workshop. I certainly don't want to do that. But so what it's like today. I met a fella, because I was not interested. And I'm just going to tell you, the divorce was over. I'd had me a little AA fling. And I learned my lesson, because I told you she takes the safety net right out from under you. And I learned. I fell hard. It was bad. But it only lasted a few months, so it couldn't have been that bad. But so I decided that I was done with, I didn't need a relationship. I want to learn how to live with me, because when I first moved and it was just me, you walk into my house, or my little apartment above the beauty school. I had this old historic Lexington. It was an old building. They had a beauty school underneath, and in a little apartment they'd rent, and you could smell all the nail stuff. They were doing nails in the beauty school. It was a great little place to live. It was a lot of memories. But I know. And so when I had an opportunity to sponsor people, and because I wasn't married, I had a simple job, I wasn't tied down to a lot of things, I was freed up. And the big book always said, if you've got the time, you can sponsor people. And I had 13 people, because I was involved in a lot of state, federal, and the jail. I did a lot of corrections. And sponsoring people I felt like was, maybe I needed that many. A lot of fear in my life. And when you're out of yourself, you're out of the fear. So maybe I needed that many. I don't know. Some people say it was a little extravagant. I don't know. I loved it. I love these people. And I remember all of them. And I think like that today. I think God has different purposes at different times in our lives. So then I go to this, I'm not interested in any man now. I'm done. I've been married. I'm done. I've helped raise my sister's kids. So I go to this wedding for the people that I work for, and they treated me like family. I was becoming a member in my own community. There's a promise in our big book in the foreword. It says we'll become members, responsible citizens in our own community. So I was trying that and looking into voting for the first time. Vote, yeah, it's a big deal. Voting's a big deal. And I was looking into how to be a responsible homeowner. Got to do that for the first time, sober. And then I went to this wedding that my boss's daughter was getting married, and again, like I said, I was treated like family. I was honored. And I was it rained 40 days and 40 nights at this time, and this wedding was going on in this historical building. And I went out to smoke my cigarette in the rain, all beautified, and one of my sponsors said, well, you need to wear this mini skirt. And I don't wear mini skirts, but this day I wore a mini skirt, okay? I don't know why I did. I don't dress like that. Some people can do it. I cannot. I cannot pull that off. I'm just telling you, it's never happened again. My husband will verify that. I say this because I was all into myself. So when I come in from smoking, there's this man standing right there. He goes, is your name Debbie Hunter? And I said, well, today it is. And I wasn't interested in talking because he had a big beer in his hand. And I'm like, yeah, well, we'll see you later. Bye. And he goes, well, so what do you do for the lumber company? He goes, what do you do? And I gave him some idea. And well, we talked for about an hour, and he was nice. And he didn't really keep going after beers. And I mean, he was halfway decent. And before we left, he goes, can I call you sometime? I said, you can call me at work. And in the meantime, we broke up. The reception broke up, and it was over. And I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know about this guy. And I went to my boss. I said, you need to check this guy out because I don't want to go out with anybody that's married or anything. Of course, I didn't say that to him. I said, just check him out and make sure there's no danger, because my boss would do that. And he did, and came back, and he goes, you really need to go out with this guy. His daddy was the let's see, one was a politician and another one was a principal at a high school. He goes, there's good blood going on here. And I said, well, that's not what I want to know. I want to know if he's married, if he's wanted, is he, what kind of felons are we going on here? I mean, I need that kind of stuff. And so here I was left hung out to dry because the guy was calling and I was supposed to call him back, and I did. And the sponsees are amazing. They will step up and tell you, you need to go out on this date. Because I hadn't dated in a long time, so I'm looking up the word date in the dictionary, because we all use dictionaries. The Webster, you can have a spiritual experience. And I'm like, an event that you may not want to miss with, and it doesn't say go home and sleep with them and then live with them. It never said that. So when I said, okay, I'm going to keep it to that, and we went out, and I said, well, I got a curfew, and it's 10 o'clock, and so I would appreciate that if I could come home. I picked a movie, I picked the restaurant, I was hands off, and he respected all of that. Well, then he goes, could we go out again? And I'm like, really? I tried to make this as bland and uncomfortable, and I really don't want to do this again. Go to my sponsees, tell them the story, and they're laughing. They're oh my God, you would tell us to go do that again. And my sponsor, they all were in cahoots. They knew me as well as I knew them. The people that I sponsor, I really, to this day, believe that was part of me being accountable in a way that I didn't think we were supposed to. I love those women, and some I'm still in contact with in Kentucky. So I agreed to go back out on the date, and agreed. I said, well, I'm gonna let him know what's more important in my life, because he doesn't know I'm an alcoholic. He doesn't know about the God thing, because I'm very spiritual, and that's going to come first before any date or any sleeping together or any of that kind of stuff. So we didn't do that, though. I'm just saying it didn't happen like that. It didn't happen like that. It was only in my head, okay? So we went out on the date, and we come back, and I said, well, I got to tell you something. I said, there's something that goes on in my life that really pulls me in. I said, I've been a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, and I'm very involved in that. And I said, the other thing is I got a power greater than myself called God. And I said, that is something that runs so deep with me. And if that's something I'd accept, maybe not. Maybe it won't work out. He goes, well, I'll tell you what. I want to hang out with you anytime you got free time. And I'm like, what do you say to that? What do you say to that? There was no out. Like, well, I don't want to go out with you again. He's like, I just want to hang out. Year later, we were married. All right. He said that he wanted to move to North Carolina. We moved to North Carolina in Wilmington because he always heard from his dad how wonderful Camp Lejeune in Wilmington area was, because his dad was in the Marines. And plus, he wanted to work for CP&L. He was an electrician. He worked for the power company in Kentucky. The amazing thing is, I found out that a company that I did business with wanted to hire me. So it was like this gift, like, here, we're going to send you to North Carolina. So we got there. So we were having great success in how we were. I'm trying to make sure I'm not going over, so I don't want anybody to fall asleep on me there. But when we got here, so a lot of things have happened. We've been here for 21 years, and I continued. He actually, when we first moved here, it was really hard to get involved in AA after you've been really grounded in another place. And so when he says, I think you need to go to an AA meeting, I said, no, I think I need to get these boxes unpacked, which had been sitting there a whole 3 weeks. I hadn't even unpacked it. So I was making excuses because I was just really feeling ungrounded and unconnected, and I was into myself. And so something said, and he's not, and by the way, he doesn't drink. That one beer that he had, he's like, it was not a problem for him to give up. And I'm like, oh no, you can't do that. You don't give up beer. Well, that was me. He's like, I don't have a problem with it. I know, that's what I thought, huh? Well, so, and he still doesn't have a problem with it. He makes pretty good decisions. We've adopted 2 children that we raised, and they are now out on their own. We've had a lot of life experiences that could have taken us down. I've had to write inventory, okay, on him, I don't know, 100 times. You know, you got a spouse, you're going to have to write inventory. Now, I wanted to believe what Don P. would say is like, I've never had a fight with Jackie. Do you ever remember him saying that? Mm-hmm. I've never had a fight with Jackie. I'm like, that's going to be me. I'm never going to fight. I don't care how much inventory. I'm never going to fight with him. Well, you know, really it wasn't always about me not fighting. It was about, you know, how to work together and everything. And we would come up with solutions like building a house. How do you do it? He wants a red brick and I want a white brick. What do you do? Pick pink? No. You just let him do it. Who cares what color the damn brick is? Yeah, who said yes, pink? Just let him have it. I worship the ground that he walks on. I think he's one of the most wonderful, special people that I've ever known. And he's still that way. Now, along our journey in our life, my sobriety, our marriage, something happened in that 11th step. Now, I'm such a believer in the 11th step, it will change. It changed my whole life. Way back when, there was a point where, I'm an animal person, and just even thinking about him sometimes, I want to say animals in my life. It's more than just that. So when I was a kid, my folks couldn't let me watch animal movies. Y'all know why. You can't watch Spirit because you're going to cry because the girl horse dies, or Flipper's in trouble, or Lassie's lost, or all of that. I'd just send me into a tornado of crying for days. So my folks would forbid me from seeing those shows because we don't know what to do for her. She's crying all the time. So I wasn't allowed, but my grandmother, she'd always sneak and let me watch. And so when a parent would show up, they're like, oh, you've let her watch those shows. Rin Tin Tin, what's another one? Lassie was the most famous.
Old Yellow.
Old Yellow. No, I didn't see that till I was 34. Yeah. No yellow. And then I was bawling over that. So, and then when I was drinking, the funny thing is, as much as I loved that kind of, compassion that I had, it was all gone when I was drinking. I didn't have that compassion. I had a lot of neglect that come out. Oh yeah, I'd have a dog, I'd feed the dog, but I would never ever show any compassion or do anything for it or do anything with it. That went on for a long time too. Of course, you heard I lost him all the time. My retriever Sasha, I lost her all the time because I wasn't even paying attention. Now, that may not seem bad to most people. It was horrible for me. So, I'm writing an 11-step because I love the 11-step. When you're writing through about your day and you're doing a review, what could you have done better, or what could you do for the stream, going into the stream of life? That's a big question to ask. What are we doing for the stream of life? I mean, sometimes it's a matter of walking into McDonald's. I did it the other day, walking into McDonald's. Matter of fact, I think she was nicer than I was. I said, how are you doing today? She's like, I'm doing good. Looks like you're doing good too. And I'm like going, that is a stream of life. I don't have to go in there sucking because it's like raining and it's 6:30 a.m. or whatever time, and the life is, and it's hot, it's 150 degrees. I didn't have to go in ugly. And so that's the stream of life. Well, now, stream of life, what could you have done better? So my husband and I sold everything we had, and we opened up a sanctuary for animals, the most unwanted animals in the world. And that's what we do today, and we love it. Absolutely love it. It's where we're supposed to be. It fits. It feels right. And we're so thankful, very thankful. And then we've had other people who have joined us on this journey. Now, my kids, they like to go off and do their thing because, they got a car now and license and everything else, and they're off doing, one's a free spirit, another one, she's traveling, hopefully the country. We'll see. So those kind of things would have never happened, the awakenings, if I hadn't have done what was in here. I mean, that 11th step changed my life. Now, I still get to work with the crazy drunks. I do work with some that are crazy. I do. They sit on my living room couch and we talking about things like, well, I get to see my kids twice a week, but I get to see my boyfriend every day. I'm like, well, why aren't you seeing your kids every day and your boyfriend twice a week? I mean, come on. I think differently now. So there's one little thing, because I'm going to stop. I love this. It's on page 164. Y'all probably have heard it 1,000 times, but there's nothing better. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past and give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Thanks a lot.